Rachel had decided to do a forensic science course. She also wanted to help others, but on a less dramatic level than she'd been able to do in the past. Time was passing quickly for her. Before she knew it, she had been at university for the best part of a year. She was sitting alone in a room, absent-mindedly packing for the end-of-year break. Her father would be collecting her in a few days' time. She was looking forward to the break and the chance to catch up with her family and tomorrow. The television in her room was on. One of her roommates had been watching something earlier, and now it was showing a news broadcast. Some months ago, war had broken out in a Middle Eastern country. Troops had been sent in from foreign armed forces to assist in bringing down a ruthless dictator who had been a threat to peace in the area for years. Rachel now watched as a news report showed a scene from an ambush of Allied troops. There were armoured vehicles laying waste in the city street. They were either on fire or lying on their sides amidst a scene of burning rubble and devastation. The bodies of at least 8 soldiers were strewn about the street. From the distance that the newscast was being shown, it was obvious that the scene was not yet secure enough for their fellow soldiers to retrieve their bodies. The first vehicle had driven over a landmine. The rest of the vehicles had then come under fire from rocket launchers and snipers located in supposedly abandoned buildings above the street. Rachel folded a jumper and placed it into a suitcase. The names of the missing soldiers were being read out on the television. She finished with a bag and closed a zip. The camera zoomed in on the soldier's body lying closest to the cameraman. She put her suitcase on the floor, watching as another small explosion occurred off to the left of the screen. She was standing next to the young soldier's body. His leg had been blown off and his face was burnt and blackened. She looked across towards one of the still-burning armoured vehicles. There was a young man standing next to it. Rachel watched as he extended his hand to an obviously wounded soldier and helped him down the side of the vehicle's undercarriage. He placed his arm around the soldier's back, supporting him, and helped him limp away from the wreckage. Although he was obviously in pain, the soldier smiled at his rescuer at something he told him that Rachel couldn't make out. The man wasn't dressed in a uniform of any kind, so Rachel figured he probably wasn't with the military. His clothing was strange and made of white cotton, not unlike the sort of thing worn by desert-dwelling nomads, flowing and cool. Just the thing for bearing the oppressive heat. Rachel thought he must instead have been a local due to the way he was dressed. The young man assisting the soldier was bringing him along a path that would cross straight in front of her, and she stood still and waited for them to pass. She looked around for any sign of an emergency vehicle, but there was none. All she could make out, at the edge of a stone building, about 12 foot off to her right, was a large swirl of colours forming. They were level with the ground, and the circle of light began to grow in the centre. The young man and the soldier continued on a path towards the light. As they crossed Rachel's path, they both stopped and turned towards her, acknowledging that she was there. Rachel felt uneasy. Except for the little Mexican boy, in most of her other visions she remained unseen, merely an observer. She wasn't sure what this development meant. The young man dressed in the robes looked right at her, smiled, and nodded his head. Then he made a gesture towards the soldier who was still lying on the ground at Rachel's feet. He then continued up the path with the badly wounded soldier. Rachel watched in amazement as they both disappeared into the swirling light and colours. They were gone. A noise at her feet caught her attention. The soldier on the ground had just started trying to sit up. Rachel looked at him, and although his face was blackened, he didn't seem to look as badly burnt as she had first thought. She leant down to him, and he held her arm to help himself to his feet. He didn't say anything to her. Instead, he looked towards a large circle of light at the end of the path and smiled. The pain in his face gave way to a look of relief, sort of like the face of a marathon runner, the way it softens as the muscles relax when they finally cross the finish line. Rachel passed a quick glance back over her shoulder towards the burning vehicles. The 6 other soldiers were all being aided, also by people wearing white clothing. All the soldiers that Rachel had witnessed as being dead were now on their feet and headed down the path behind Rachel towards the light. Rachel looked back towards the coloured circle. It had moved closer towards her and the injured soldier, and they were only now about 3 feet away from it. She squeezed the soldier's hand gently and helped him towards the light, where he seemed to want to go so badly. She looked down over her own body and noticed that her jeans and t-shirt had disappeared. Now instead, her body was covered in a long flowing white robe made of fine cotton. The last second before the light engulfed them, she realised that the soldier was walking on both of his legs again. He reached out his hands towards the light, before he too disappeared. Rachel was standing alone in a tunnel of light. The colours were passing through her white robes and she was glowing with an almost ultraviolet effect. Her eyes shot open and she fell backwards onto her bed. She'd been dreaming again. The news report was long gone and some other show was now rambling on to the bursts of recorded laughter. The door of her room opened suddenly and in walked her roommate. "Sorry," she said quickly, obviously embarrassed. "I didn't realize that you were getting changed or would have knocked." Rachel looked down and discovered the source of her friend's embarrassment. She was standing there, almost completely naked. Her jeans, shirt and underwear were placed neatly on the bed. Rachel herself was completely uncovered, except for a fine white cotton robe that she was holding across the front of her body. Her roommate backed away, still apologizing, even though Rachel kept insisting it was her fault and she should have locked the door. After she left, Rachel dropped her robe and quickly redressed. Then she went to apologize again and let her roommate know it was all right to come back in. She returned to her room 5 minutes later to finish up her packing. She noticed that curiously, the long white robe had disappeared. Even stranger, though, was the dirty black handprint that she had on her left arm. She remembered it as the spot where the soldier in a vision had held her arm as he got to his feet. That night again, she dreamed she was flying, hovering way above a smouldering town. A desolate black wasteland lay beneath her. The scene was only broken occasionally by the glow and flicker of small fires still burning in patches. She rose higher in the air to expand her view of the horizon. All that she could make out, though, was a scene of more desolation and blackness. There was nothing left to survey on the ground. The only break from the black void below was the ever-growing circle of light and colour that seemed to be swirling so high in the air. It must have been located at the edge of the Earth's atmosphere. Rachel watched as small beams of light began to launch themselves skywards from the Earth to the light circle. It was growing larger and larger in size. As the light beam shot up from the Earth faster and faster, a strange noise began to fill Rachel's ears. It was almost musical, but it sounded like an orchestra playing way too fast. The light beams increased in intensity and speed as the noise gathered momentum in the background. It was all happening so fast, Rachel could hardly follow until, bang. It was as if someone had slammed a large book shut right next to her. She sprang from her bed, covered in sweat. The vision had ended abruptly with the circle of light that had been growing and growing, suddenly flashing to double its size, before disappearing to a small white dot. Then it was gone altogether. It was like when you turned off your TV screen at the end of the day and you're left with a small white blimp that soon fades to nothing. The noise had reached a crescendo too, becoming louder and louder. It had been shut off at exactly the same time as the light had gone out. Rachel had thought, though, for a few seconds afterwards, she had been able to make out the pitiful moans and wails of people crying out from a long way away. Then, nothing. No vision, no noise. Just the stillness of her room and the noise of her roommate's breathing, deep asleep. Rachel decided, as she climbed back into bed, that she really did need this holiday.